Welcome to the SDA Housing Podcast, brought to you by NDIS Property Australia. Before starting this episode, we need to provide a general disclaimer. Information contained in this podcast is general in nature only. It does not take into account the objectives, financial situation, or needs of any particular person. You need to consider your financial situation and needs before making any decisions based on the information in this podcast. And you should consider seeking independent and professional advice for your personal circumstances. All right, let's begin.
Hello all, my name is Min. I'm with Jess from The Right Fit again, episode number 2, or the second one with her. Jess, how are you?
I'm good, thanks. How are you, Min?
Good. Did you enjoy the first episode we did?
I did. It was a lot of fun. I'm glad we got it done.
Awesome. Remind me to let you talk to Debbie about doing a webinar about hospital discharge and the complexities of that world, yeah? It'd be awesome to do that.
Yeah, absolutely.
So today is the SIL landscape from the eyes of a support coordinator. I recently did a podcast, me and Debbie did a podcast about the SDA landscape from the perspective of a SDA assessor, Bruce Bromley. So today is the SIL landscape from your perspective, support coordinator. Please talk to me. What do you know? What's the hot gossip?
Hot gossip. I think the biggest challenge at the moment is for SIL providers is that it's becoming less and less feasible and more difficult to match participants and place them, fill vacancies and place them where it's going to work long term. So as a SIL provider, a lot of the times they don't have that resource or, that additional, those additional contacts with other SIL providers or support coordinators to find participants that are going to match their vacancies with their existing participants. So I'm glad that at The Right Fit we're able to help with that. But I am seeing a lot of stressed directors of SIL providers at the moment with, lots of SIL houses, but maybe only one resident in there, which is becoming really difficult for them to keep their head above water. Funding, if the participant's only funded at a 1-to-2 ratio or a 1-to-3 ratio, and there's only one participant in there, it's, there's, a lot of providers are running at a loss. Ratios,
such a powerful word, that word.
Mm-hmm.
If the ratio's wrong, just ain't going to cut it.
And that's it, yeah.
And, I didn't really appreciate the word ratios until the last year of my 5-year journey in the NDS world. Because you thought, 1-to-2, 1-to-3, 3-bedroom house, whatever, it should be simple, right? But the providers, they really are focused on the ratios of the care, supports, and the housing. And in the SDA world, the investors and the real estate people, developers, builders, they don't understand that complexity of that kind of
correct
requirement. Yeah.
Yeah.
In fact, we should do a ratio topic one day.
We probably should. Yeah. Because again, there's a lot of layers to it, and there's a lot that goes into it, both from an NDIS funding perspective, but also from a placement perspective.
Yeah, because your ratios of support funding, the ratios of the SIL provider need in that dwelling, and what the NDIA believe the ratio should be. So you have 3 compete, and then also the families. So you have 3 or 4 competing agendas as to what the ratio should be for the participant. Yeah,
that's right.
It's always challenging trying to juggle all that at the same time. Yeah.
Yeah.
But what trends are you seeing out there for participant needs? What's being offered? What's your feedback here?
So I think the biggest trends that we're seeing in terms of participant needs, participants actually wanting to find a suitable housemate to live with. There are a lot of participants that we're working with at the moment. They are funded to live with 1 or 2 other people, and they want some company. They want to share their support. So it's making it what's really hard is that they've been either placed previously or currently in a property with another participant, and there was not a lot of care put into who they were matched with. So therefore, that placement and that housemate-ship fell apart, and now you've got 2 participants or 3 that are all living independently and actually quite lonely and quite miserable because the only sort of human interaction they're getting is with their carers.
Good point. Are you aware of a platform called Marco Polo?
Yes, I am.
How do you find that?
I think it's great. Again, though, I think our point of difference to Marco Polo is that we don't charge a subscription fee to providers. So I believe when you're engaging with Marco Polo, there's an ongoing fee that you pay as a provider. We only charge providers if we find a match for them. So that's our, at the right fit, that's our point of difference. But I do think it is a great initiative, the idea behind Marco Polo to, once again, similar to us, put the participant first and, you know, find the right fit and the right match in terms of a housemate, because it is your everyday living situation. You want it to work and you want to get along with that person. So I think the guys at Marco Polo are doing some great work.
Yeah, totally agree. Now, you being a small business, you're very nimble in your service approach. You're very much hand-holding the process. Now, that's a platform. Listings, people subscribing, logging on, surfing, trying to match each other. Whereas you're more of a...
We do the work for you. Yeah. It's a consulting brokerage setup.
Yes.
It is very boutique and it is individualized to each person. So we take out all the legwork of searching for a housemate or searching for a home and living arrangement.
Are there many more? I know I'm going off topic here. Sorry.
That's fine.
Are there many more services like you, or should there be more?
There should be. I wish there were, because...
Platforms are too...
As much...
Yeah.
No, and as much... In terms of developing the right fit, when I was doing that, I was trying to do my own market research to see, well, what else is out there and what are other people doing in this space that's similar to the idea that I have that's working, and what's working really well and what's not working, so that I can kind of hone in on that and then provide something a bit out of the box that's going to fill another gap. But I actually was not able to find any other service or sort of small business that offer such a personalized consulting for just home and living that doesn't cost the participant anything from their plan.
Yep. Are there enough housing options out there, do you see, that are being developed to meet the different support needs and preferences out there?
Yes. I think yes and no. In terms of your physically complex, medically complex, improved livability, fully accessible space, yes. In terms of the robust space, there are nowhere near enough homes. And that is where I'm seeing a huge gap in the market. If you are looking to invest, I would strongly recommend exploring that. It's not for everyone. As a property owner, there's a lot of risks in investing in that robust space. However, there is a huge need, especially sort of even outer eastern suburbs in Melbourne. There's nothing. Again, it's one of those property types or build types that I could almost guarantee would be filled immediately if you were to build or invest in that category.
Yeah, totally agree. How do you see the vacancy-driven model affecting the quality of SIL placements out there?
I think the biggest challenge for SIL providers, right, is they have vacancies and they have, they're willing to support participants with the support workers that they have, even if they know that they don't have enough support workers or they don't have support workers with the right skill set to care for a particular participant's needs. And while, yes, it fills a vacancy short term and, you're able to make some profit in the short term, it's not a long-term option. And that the right fit, we're really, really big on long-term solutions. We don't want a quick fix. We want to place someone somewhere and have it be so right that they never want to leave. They are so incredibly happy with their support team. They love where they live. They're proud of their home. And then the result of that is that you have a provider that doesn't have to worry that they're going to lose a client and they're going to have to refill that vacancy. So rush filling vacancies is the biggest issue that I'm seeing with SIL providers. And I understand a lot of them are really struggling financially to, just pay the bills and make any kind of profit. I totally get it. However, sometimes you've just got to put in that little bit of extra time to make sure that transition of that participant is slow and controlled and you're collaborating with the whole team and you're not rush putting someone into a vacancy because it will fall apart eventually.
Yep. Thanks for sharing all that with me. Back to the SIL landscape. I had two conversations. One was with a provider in Sydney, Anthony Du, and then another one was Tanya Gomez. They both told me there's one shocking trend. There's a lot in the last 6 months. Providers are dropping off their participants at hospitals, just leaving them there, and it's moving on. I can only assume that this is because of funding or lack of housing. What is this cost of, with the rumour we're hearing about this? How are dropping participants off at hospitals?
It's not gossip. It's absolutely happening. And unfortunately, I have to back the SIL providers here, because when a participant is not funded for the supports that they need to keep themselves, their housemates and their support workers safe, it is such a risk on the provider that a lot of times as a support coordinator, our advice is if you don't feel safe supporting this participant with what they've been funded for, you should take them to hospital for a social admission. And that will, that person will then be linked in with the health liaison officer, who will be able to escalate a review of the home and living decision. Now, with a home and living decision in an NDIS plan, a SIL provider can only charge at the ratio that person has been funded. So if they're funded for 1-3 care, but actually they need one-on-one support 24/7, the SIL provider can only claim for 1-3. So they're losing money every single hour that they're supporting that participant. And if that person has complex health needs on top of their disability support needs, or they have really significant behaviours, that's not a safe environment for that person with the disability, their housemates, or the support workers. So while it is awful, you absolutely, as a SIL provider, you don't want to be taking a well person to hospital. However, unfortunately, it is the only way that we're able to see a timely response from the NDIS at the moment in terms of that home and living decision to get that additional support.
So that's the only option?
It's not the only option. As a SIL provider, you can continue to run at a loss and hope that the NDIS might look at the review request within 3 months. But are you going to continue to run at a loss for 3 months? Not many providers in the current state of the economy can afford to do that. So, look, I dealt with a provider probably about a year ago now. They were so reluctant to take a participant to hospital because they were a provider that were absolutely in the space for the right reasons. They wanted to care for this person, but they just couldn't afford to do it anymore. And they took that person to hospital, and once they had done that, they rang me and they said, there's actually over $100,000 of unpaid invoices. Can you help me escalate that? And I said, well, you're probably not going to get paid for it because, one, the invoices state that you were charging 2-to-1 supports when the person's only funded, I think they were 1-to-3. And second of all, there's actually no funding left. So the NDIS aren't going to pay you for supports that weren't approved in the first place. So, it's a lot of money for that provider to have to let go of.
Oh my God.
So
how surely the provider could have, I'm just surprised that if they're only funded for 1-to-3 and they put in two support workers doing that participant 2-to-1, they were hoping that we could reimburse in the future for that. Do a lot of providers do this?
Look, again, it's down to that education piece. A lot of providers aren't aware that, they can't be paid if the funding's not there to begin with, especially when ratios. This is why we need to do a whole episode on ratios, because that home and living decision in that person's plan was 1-to-3. So you cannot charge anything more than that. That's what they've been approved for. And unfortunately, I think there are a lot of providers out there who probably have been caught up in that as well. And, that's the end of a lot of businesses, I think. If you're not educating yourself and you're not reading the price guide and you're not understanding what that means, particularly in that home and living space.
Yep, gotcha. Well, thank you for sharing that with me. What happens when providers' priorities and participants' goals don't?
Worst case scenario, you see a participant end up looking for a new provider, which, is one huge job for that participant and their support coordinator and their team. But also from a SIL perspective, it's difficult because you're stuck again with a vacancy. But my mentality as a support coordinator is, if the SIL provider's priorities and the participant's goals aren't aligning, there needs to be a conversation. Communication is key. A lot of times in the beginning, I say to anyone that's just moved into a SIL or SDA arrangement, give it 6 weeks. There's going to be teething issues. It's not going to be perfect, but you need to communicate every step of the way where there's something that's occurring that you're not happy with so that it can be rectified, because no one's going to know. And this is the same here. Even if you've been with a provider for over a year and you're realizing, actually, I'm not 100% happy with this support, you need to communicate it, because a lot of the time the providers don't know. They just think business as usual, everything's fine. So their priority might be, okay, we're just going to keep doing the same thing, same roster every week, same schedule every day. But actually the participant's not happy with particular support workers that are on their team. But if they don't have either a support coordinator or advocate to express that to the team, no changes will be made. So again, communication is really key. And a lot of things are easily fixed. There's always a solution. So
Agreed.
Really, really hone in on trying to find that solution if you are a provider and exhausting all options. The biggest thing, or biggest piece of advice I can give to providers out there as well is, if you've explored all options and, the participant is still not happy, completely fine. We bring out choice and control again. That's fine. This is what we have to offer you. If you would like, we can support you to find a new provider. Now, sometimes if you are supportive in that handover process and that transition, you might find that that participant will try another provider, and worst case scenario, they end up going to a provider that is not competent in the supports that they're delivering. And that participant will end up coming back to you because you've done the right thing by them in terms of supporting them through that transition, helping them navigate their new provider, giving a handover to the new provider. All of that is reputation based. So, just make sure at all times that you're doing everything to support that client, because the disability industry is big, but it's also very small, and things like that people don't forget. So you'll be surprised how quickly they can come back to you when they realise sometimes the grass isn't greener.
Sure. Now, all this talk about swapping, changing, jumping back and so forth, they come back to human impact, the toll on families, the toll on participants. Give me some stories, some examples here of or explain to us what the toll is for people who are part of the whole process and they're in unsuitable options or unstable SIL environments.
I think the biggest impact is where you find participants who have had, they've engaged with the SIL provider, but there's no consistent team. Every day someone new comes in who doesn't know their schedule, doesn't know the routine, and that poor individual is having to basically coach the support worker every single day, or a new support worker every single day, on exactly how to take care of them. Now, that's exhausting. That kind of impact is something that, unfortunately, we see a lot in the space of disability, and I'm hoping that that's something that we can slowly change, where teams are consistent and participants feel as though they don't have to constantly tell their story. They don't have to constantly, guide someone on how they need to be showered or how they need to have their meal prepared. That human impact is huge. And I think, even when it comes down to being matched with another housemate, for example, that match is incredibly important, because what we see there is when things go wrong and when people are unsuitably matched, it can create a very hostile and very unsafe environment for everyone involved. And that impact is huge. As a provider, you could end up with, WorkSafe claims for a hostile work environment. You could end up with complaints to the Quality and Safeguards Commission because participants aren't feeling safe. It's just really important that we're putting the participant first and actually listening to our staff when they're saying that things aren't going well in the home.
Yep, totally agree, yes. Planning and advocacy. How well do planners and NDI delegates understand what the right fit actually means in practice?
Well, I'm slowly working on sort of sharing more about the right fit with my contacts at the NDIA, and the response has been overall incredibly positive. I think a lot of them are relieved that there's finally someone out there who is, acting as a reverse engineered support coordinator and able to provide an extra pair of hands to support coordinators, particularly those in complex housing situations or requiring rapid hospital discharge. I think, though, the biggest challenge that I face as a support coordinator with NDIS planners is they're not completely aware of the state of the market. in terms of housing and in terms of SIL. They're not dealing with it day to day. All they hear is stories from support coordinators saying, I haven't been able to find anything for this person, or this SIL provider, they weren't able to provide qualified staff for this particular person. They're not actually seeing it on the ground and they're not realising the impact. The other thing is, when there's cuts made to SIL funding, for example, they're not seeing that impact either. They're making that planning decision, but they don't have to then, provide that information to a provider and let them know, actually, you're not going to be able to continue to support this person in the way that you have been. The funding's been cut. So I think as part of that the right fit and how it plays out in the day-to-day, there is a really big gap in the understanding from the NDIA.
Very true. We should also do another podcast topic. What to do when funding gets cut.
Yeah. Correct.
Are we doing enough during the planning process to advocate for genuine choice control in housing?
I think we are. I think at the end of the day, as a support coordinator, I very strongly encourage my participants, if they're able, and their families to review all the evidence that's being submitted to the NDIS before a home and living decision is achieved. Because at the end of the day, if a participant is not comfortable with certain information being shared with the agency, or they feel that their true support needs aren't reflected in the reports, that's their time to actually speak up and say no. You've said that I have the capacity to do X, Y, Z, but actually I need a significant amount of help to do that, and it's not reflected in the report. And that's where we see, if someone hasn't reviewed that or their family haven't reviewed that, that's where you see funding outcomes that, are disastrous.
Disaster. Another big word. Okay. I won't go there. The inclusion and innovation. On this topic here, what do you think needs to change in the system to create a more inclusive participant-led SIL model? I mean, they all should be participant-led SIL models, but what can be done to make it more focused on that?
Yeah. Look, I wish there was a world where we could have SIL funded in plans, but have it, provided by independent workers. There are quite a few clients on my caseload as a support coordinator where they've had independent workers for years and they have great working relationships with them, and these workers are absolutely incredible, but the workers are not interested in working for a provider or registering as an independent worker. So therefore, when that person is then funded for SIL, they're no longer able to have those workers deliver their support, so they have to then engage with a whole new provider and build a whole new team. So I would like to see some more flexibility in that space, because at the end of the day, I believe the participant should have that choice in who delivers their supports, and it shouldn't be bound to just all the workers from one provider.
Gotcha. Are there any creative or cool emerging approaches or trends to SIL that people would appreciate more of?
Yeah, I think I really like the idea of hiring to suit a new client instead of having a provider that's just got hundreds of support workers and they just allocate people based on the area. And part of, a SIL provider's onboarding process is that they gather some really specific information about what that participant's preferences are in terms of their support workers, so that they can build a really unique team for that person. Yeah, that's probably something that I think would work really well.
Gotcha. What do you think support coordinators and families should keep in mind when exploring SIL options?
It's very similar to exploring SDA options. I think you need to do due diligence and ask some really specific questions about how they would handle challenging situations, particularly in emergencies. What are their policies and procedures? What sort of staff training do they provide before or when they're onboarding staff? What is their feedback and complaints process? And, asking them if they have workers with experience in the exact disability type that you might have, because you might find that if they do, you may not have to explain so much about what it is you need from them in terms of your supports. And that can always help. And I know hearing from other clients of mine having to sort of explain exactly what it is they need from their support workers every single day is quite frustrating. So having someone that just gets it and can step in and take care of everything is a big weight off their shoulders.
Thank you so much for that. If you could wave a magic wand, Jess, what's one thing in the system that you would fix? Did you want 1 or 10 wands?
Look, I think my biggest thing comes down to the outcomes of participants. And the one thing that I wish that we could fix was faster outcomes from the NDIS, but also a better system in terms of communication and collaboration between disability and healthcare. A lot of the times with hospital discharge and, exploring SIL and SDA options, I understand there's a lot of pressure in hospitals to, discharge patients due to bed blocks. But a lot of the times if they're rushed out of hospital and just placed anywhere, they end up back in hospital within 30 days. So it's not really going to help your bed block in the long term. So if we had a process and a way of collaborating where we focused on long-term solutions to mitigate the risk of readmission, that would be my biggest wish, because it's awful being in hospital in the first place, and having to go back there is not anyone's wish or priority. So if we could make that a lot better for NDIS participants, that would be awesome.
Yep, totally agree. Okay, so as we wrap up this episode here, my last 2 questions to you would be, how is the right fit your business helping participants navigate and overcome some of these systemic challenges, please?
So the right fit was founded on the idea that, we wanted to fill a gap in rushed placements for participants, and we wanted to find solutions for participants that were long-term solutions for the provider as well. So being able to be an extra pair of hands for a support coordinator and do a really extensive housing and support search for a participant, and also do that background vetting to ensure that the provider we're linking them up with has all their checks and balances are in place, means that we're able to place participants in beautiful homes with incredible support, and they feel that their needs and preferences are heard, and their support and care needs on the daily are being met. And we're finding that providers are thrilled as well, because they're able to deliver the services that they are registered to deliver, and they're able to provide incredible housing to people who need it.
Wonderful. And my last question to you is, what do you wish more providers understood about what makes placement sustainable, not just a fast transaction?
Again, it's person-centered, having a personal touch. The one thing that I absolutely love seeing with SIL providers or SDA providers is, a lot of times when we've placed people, the day that they're moving in, you get there and all the staff are waiting out the front with balloons and a welcome home sign. And it's little touches like that that really make a difference for participants, and they feel really welcomed and excited about moving into their new home, as opposed to, this is just another place that I'm going to be in for short term, and, I wonder who's going to support me today. Whereas you've got a big warm welcome and everyone's there to meet you and, get to know you and make your home really feel like home.
Mm-hmm. Agreed. I want to tell our listeners about a conversation you and I had about a month and a half ago. I rang you up, talking about some other things, and you said to me you were working on a participant, funding had run out, and you were talking to someone in the NDIA, and you said, put it on now, by today, no matter what. Do you remember that conversation you and I had? Do you remember that?
Yeah.
Please tell our listeners about this little incident, please. I want you to repeat it, because it shows you, it shows us that determination by support coordinators who care and want to make a difference actually could work. And just please educate us about this experience here.
Yeah, absolutely. So a client of mine had moved into an SDA and was also receiving SIL support. This was back in April, I think they moved in. And the day they moved in, we notified the NDIS and said, look, this is where they moved. This is their new address. And can you please put the SDA funding in the plan so the provider can start claiming their payments? And I think about 6 weeks went by and the provider reached out to me and said they had not been able to claim any of the payments. So I contacted the planner and received no response. I contacted again and again, no response. So we were at probably 8 or 9 weeks into the tenancy at this point. There was still no payments. So I submitted a complaint to the NDIS. And the next day I got a call And they said, oh, this participant's not funded for SDA. And I said, what do you mean? I said, they've been my client since 2022. I can guarantee you they're funded for SDA because they've been living in SDA previously. And she said, oh, no, he's not eligible. And I said, well, I'm going to be really frank with you. I said, this individual is an amputee. They are eligible for SDA. They have fully accessible SDA funding. They've accessed it previously. And they said, oh, well, there's been a reassessment and there's no funding. And I said, according to who? Who's done the reassessment? What evidence have you requested? And she said, oh, well, I need to speak to my manager. I'll call you back. I said, no problem. So she rang me back about 10 minutes later and she said, oh, so it's been escalated to a higher delegate who's going to have a look. And I said, well, first of all, there's no new evidence. This person is still an amputee. Their leg hasn't grown back. I was incredibly frank. They are eligible for SDA and you're going to put the funding in their plan today because I have a provider who is now in financial hardship because they haven't been paid for 10 weeks. You need to put the funding in the plan today or we're going to have a really big problem. And so this was about 4:30 on a Tuesday. Monday morning, I open up my laptop and I got, here is the participant's new plan. Here is the funding. And I went, thank you very much. So sometimes you just have to be really firm and you need to be very frank because, and look, this poor lady from the complaints team was absolutely not her fault. She was just reading the information on the screen of, what was on this participant's file, but they don't see what we see as support coordinators and they don't see what we see as SIL providers, the on-the-ground stuff and the impact. This, poor gentleman is requiring SDA and this provider has provided an incredible home for them to live in and they need to be paid for it. That provider has a mortgage they need to pay and they're not able to make their mortgage payments due to a systemic error. It needs to be rectified immediately.
Well, here. Good work. If I had more people like you on the phone, dealing with the NDIA the way you did.
Yeah.
But, it's been a good session today to hear your thoughts and views on the landscape of the SIL providers, the SIL world, because we in the SDA world don't see that. Very rare. Don't see it, don't care. What they don't care about it, they don't see it. It's not in their peripheral to appreciate the challenges of the SIL world. Challenges for families, participants, and support coordinators and SIL providers is very hard. And the fight they had to do to fight against the NDIA for funding all the time, it's really hard. So, a lot of investors think participants are everywhere, they should get funding, but they don't realise ratios. It's a very powerful word, and funding is also just as powerful as that as well, yeah. But Jess, I thank you so much for your time. It's a very long, detailed, in-depth dive into the SIL landscape. And I really want to get Debbie to talk to you more about ratios or funding discharges from the hospitals to get more public awareness about that out there. But one of my questions to you is, Jess, do you do placements of not just SDA participants, but also SIL participants as well? Is that right?
Yes, we do. Absolutely. So SIL and or SDA. So if you are a participant and you need SIL or SDA or both, we are here to help.
Awesome. So if anyone wants to reach out to you on your website, what is your website details, please?
Is ndiswithjess.com. And if you sign up to our mailing list, we will have your details. We'll be able to reach out to you. Otherwise, my email address is therightfitau@gmail.com.
Jess, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it. Talk to you soon, okay?
Great. Bye. Thanks, Min.
Bye.
We hope you enjoyed this episode. Please make sure you are subscribed and following us so you can keep in the loop with all of our upcoming episodes. We would really appreciate it if you could leave us a 5-star rating, a written review, and to share this podcast with those that could benefit. Until next time, catch you on the next episode.